Welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have filmmaker Michael John Warren. He's the director of the new Paramount Plus docuseries Lolla, the Story of Lollapalooza. Michael, thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about the project.
Great. Yeah, I just watched it last night. I wasn't sure because I had been doing a lot of work. It was late. I wasn't sure if I was going to watch all of it, and I just plowed through all of it. So
Good. I'm glad it held your attention.
yeah, I mean Lollapalooza. I don't know about you, but for me, was a major thing in my life.
Of course.
I didn't get to see the first one, so having the first episode solely devoted to the first, um, tour was especially great for me because even though it was covered by MTV and stuff, we didn't have the access
Yeah.
to everything that was actually filmed and shown on the first episode. The second year and on got more coverage.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you get involved with the project? Why did you feel you needed to do the project?
Yeah, the project came to me through my friends at Funmeter. They did McMillions, and they're both documentary directors in their own right. The gentleman who owned that company, and they essentially asked me if I'd be interested in doing it. And when I heard the word Lollapalooza, I instantly knew I was going to do it because I was at the first Lollapalooza.
Oh, awesome.
I was 17 years old. It was in my hometown. Me and my weird little avant-garde punk jazz friends hated corporations and were worried about the environment and the whole Rodney King thing, and we were just pissed about the status quo and what America had become, corporate greed. Um, we were really angry, and when I saw this seemingly impossible lineup, that first lineup of Ice-T, who I totally loved as a child, and still do, mind you, and Siouxsie and the Banshees and Nine Inch Nails and Jane's Addiction and Living Color, who I truly worshipped as a child and still do. I knew I had to be there. And I walked onto the festival grounds and I saw the people moshing and I saw people I saw them doing what we were doing at the little all ages punk shows we were doing, but they were
Right.
doing it in an amphitheater.
Yeah.
And it was mosh pitch and stage diving and pogoing and all that stuff on this massive scale. And it was the moment that was the moment I realized that me and my weird little arty punk friends weren't alone in the way we were feeling. And there were thousands of kids here who felt that way. And if there were thousands of us here in Mansfield, Massachusetts, that meant that there were millions of us across America. And this is before we were called Gen X, I believe. And I feel like that first Lollapalooza took all of the things that sort of became Gen X and brought them into one space in little towns across America. And we sort of, we kind of all found each other when we realized, oh, this whole generation feels disaffected and pissed off, and we want to try to change things if we can. And so, yeah, that first Lollapalooza for me, I hadn't traveled the world yet, and I didn't realize there was so much I didn't realize. And it really cracked open my perspective and made me realize there's a whole planet out there that you need to go find, little Mikey Warren from Mansfield, Massachusetts. And I did. So it really changed my life.
Yeah. If there's one, I don't have. Well, I have some regrets, but as far as like entertainment wise, I wish I had seen that. I didn't
Yeah.
go until 94 and 95, and then I gotta be honest, the 97 tour, I mean, I'm sure I knew about it at the time, but man, I don't remember that even happening.
Yeah.
I remember Metallica being a big stink, and I have to agree that that was probably not the right idea. Even though
Yeah.
I liked Metallica, and even though I do think they fit, at the time they brought that aggro thing, and we saw that play out at Woodstock 2 years later.
Yeah.
There was obviously something bubbling up that was weirder and more damaging and
Yeah.
more testosterone fueled, and all
Yeah.
that. A lot of stuff that we're commenting on now. But your point that you made about you were pissed off about corporate greed and everything. And now here we are in 2024. And man, it's like our parents' generation, and then, us, as much as we wanted to try and fix things, it's like nothing, everything got worse.
Yeah, I think that's almost right. I think that's almost completely right. I think there's some things we've gotten a little bit better at, but one of the things that this project required me to go back to my teenage years for kind of the first time ever, really, and really dig back into what was driving our emotions at that time. And sort of led me into this place of feeling a little bit like, gosh, not enough has changed in 30 years. And I hope that you've watched all three. So I'm hoping that my friends in Gen Z watch this series and see what we did wrong and what we did right, and understand that the things that they care about were things that we were fighting hard about as when we were 17 years old. And maybe they can learn from our mistakes and do better than we did, at least know that it's not easy to change. And I think, I think they're doing a lot of really impressive stuff. I have a lot of faith in Gen Z. And I do think some things are starting to change around the margins. I certainly think things like gay rights have improved dramatically in the last 30 years. But other than that, it's been pretty much, I don't know if we've made a lot of progress other than.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that stuff all day. I mean, yes, we've made a lot of giant leaps with, in particular, gay rights, but there's still such a unbelievable fight about everything. It's like everything that moved forward. There is a certain segment that wants to move back, way back. I
Yeah.
mean, the best example of it, even though they fixed it, was the Arizona 1864 law about abortion. Like, somebody actually put that into play, and they said, "Oh my God, we can't really have that be,"
Yeah.
because there was also a law in Arizona about marrying somebody like 12 or something.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, we can't go back to the past. What do you want to? I don't understand people, but that's beside the point.
This is why we got to fight. Right?
Yeah, and I do have more faith in.
Change is hard. You got to fight for it.
Yeah, I do have more faith in Gen Z than perhaps their predecessors. And Gen Z, I actually read recently, are being smart and skewing college for trade schools.
Yeah.
Which sounds like my grandparents' generation.
Yeah. And
So I have a lot of faith in them.
Yeah. And unions are coming back, and there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not enough. It's a big climb, but there are some little things that I look at, I'm like, maybe this is going to help.
Yeah. Well, with regards to you've been involved in the music business a lot. You've done a lot of you did the live thing, the live film thing with Rent, and you did Jay-Z. You worked with Drake. I'm not even going to bother asking you about Drake and his whole nonsense right now. But how insane was it for you to be able to interview Perry Farrell for that kind of time? I mean, obviously you guys framed him in a certain way. You had all the I mean, you guys really did a nice job of framing him while you were filming.
Thank you. I'm really proud of the way that interview looks, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
What was it like to interview Perry? It's, that phrase, don't meet your heroes. Like that's almost always true, but it's really not true of Perry. Perry is exactly what you want him to be and what you expect him to be. He's still, even all these years later, has this sort of magical childlike quality where he's such a creative person. He's got ideas, and he's got this wonder in his eyes. And, he is just endlessly fascinating to listen to. What he's got so much happening. He's so smart and so, not like naive is the wrong word, but he's such a dreamer. He's smart, and he's a dreamer, and he knows, oh, that might be impossible, but we should try it. Like there's not a lot of people in the world who really think that way, and then actually can take the steps to get something done. So
right.
It was a great honor, and I idolized him as a child. Of course, we thought Perry was one of the coolest people we'd ever seen, or he almost didn't seem real to us as a child. So it was a great honor to get to work with someone who I idolized as a child. Not just because I idolized him as a child, but because he is inspiring me now as an artist. You know, I'm an artist of a certain age at this point, and to see Perry, who's even older than me, still have this like magic ability that you would expect out of a teenager, it was like inspiring for me. I'm like, oh, you can really hold on to that if you cultivate it, and you're not afraid, and you're willing to fail and take risks, and you know, find happiness in the way you find happiness, and to find anger and to use your anger. He does all these things and still in a way that's so impressive. And so it was a great honor to work with him, and he's still teaching me all these decades later.
Yeah. Yeah, so I covered from 2005 until I think the last year I covered it, the Chicago-based version, was the year Metallica and Paul McCartney headline. That was my final year, and after that, I was like, I turned in my Lollapalooza card. And now I honestly, I'm old. I don't recognize 90% of the artists playing. So I mean, and then you look at the 10% that I do. There's like one or two I want to go see. So yeah,
Yeah.
as much as I like the idea of discovering new music, I don't like the idea of walking around a 2 or 3 football fields worth of ground at my age, in potentially 90 plus degree weather and humidity in an open field to discover it. I'll find it my own way. But I covered for 5 years or so, and so I was in the media area, and Perry happened to be there one time. It was my only interaction with Perry the whole time I was covering it. And I said hello to him, and I handed him my business card thinking it was really cool. And I mean, I know it wasn't cool, but he looks at it, he goes, "Oh, rock and roll ghost. Thanks, Brett." I'm like, I just gave you my business card, and you're like so happy.
That's what I mean. Like he's like a really special soul. Like this, it's not, I'm not just saying this to
Yeah.
say it. Like he is a unique person that has like a magical quality about him.
Yeah, and what's fascinating too is that I mean he lived a hard young life. I mean, the things
Yeah.
he did, the things he said he did, the drugs, the
I think if
all
he
this
said
stuff.
it, he probably did it, just
Yeah,
FYI.
and it's just
I
like
don't think
that.
he lies.
Yeah, but that didn't change him. And the music business tends to grind people down, and yet he has that childlike wonder, which I think is so special. And I may critique him for this or that, but just the sense of optimism is
Yeah.
is just incredible.
Yeah, he's still doing it now. He's got really bold dreams and things that he's working towards now that, I don't know if he's announced it to the world yet, and it's his story to tell, but he's still doing all of that stuff, and he still wants to change the world now, and he's got plans to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a really remarkable person.
Was there anybody, you had people like Lars Ulrich from Metallica, you had Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, you had Ice T. I thought was hilarious
Yeah, he's so
because
good.
he embodies that 80s 90s spirit, like what he just said, come the fuck on, like
Yeah, yeah,
you know it's like it's so awesome to see. And even though he's kind of part of the establishment now, he's this established actor on SVU,
yeah.
he's still got that power in him, which I think is great.
Yeah,
What
exactly. He's someone who didn't age either. I mean, he does, but that interview, first of all, I was having a panic attack during that interview because I was like, I need like 3 more episodes now because everything coming out of his mouth needs to make
Yeah,
the cut.
yeah,
And he can say things that really no one else can really say. Ice-T can say it, no one else can. And that interview was brilliant. I really am so happy he joined us for this project. He loves Lollapalooza. He loves Perry. They still love each other.
yeah.
Like this, he understands how big this was for him. He recruited Ice Cube to do the next year. He's like, you should do it, Ice Cube. Like, I think that's crazy. He's like, you should do it. It's huge.
Yeah.
And so he's another person who, to your point, yes, he's got this major network acting job where he plays a cop of all things,
Yeah.
which is totally like, what? How's that even possible? He's the man who wrote and performed Cop Killer, much to the chagrin of most of the
Oh
right
yeah, I
of
remember
America.
that. That was insane back
Yeah.
then.
and now he's on, Law and Order. So he's another person, and again, he's another person that I met. He's older than me, but he still has that. He's still kind of probably the same guy he was, maybe wiser now,
Yeah.
but he's still that same kid who was up on the stage chanting "Cop Killer" back in 1991.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to kind of stroke Gen X's ego, but I think we always had a sense of, I mean, we were the generation of sarcasm. We were the generation of snideness, and we were pissed off because, I mean, and we're pissed off now because we're so small, number one, and we keep, and honestly, our generation's musical heroes keep dying so early. I mean, Steve Albini just left.
I
You
know.
know,
Jeez.
it's like, we lost Cornell, Cobain,
Yeah.
Staley, what, Scott Weiland, all these people that our generation just seems to be deteriorating in front of our eyes somehow, even though
Yeah.
there's a lot of us still around. It just, we seem to just not be in the mix of anything. We're forgotten.
Yeah, I don't feel forgotten. I understand that sentiment. Like we've never had a US president, right?
Right.
First of all, we might.
Yeah, hopefully.
We're
Hopefully
not that
one day.
old. Like we've got all the boomers up there running for president, so we still get a shot at president.
Yeah.
And I feel like we made a pretty big mark, honestly, in our youth, and we still have time. We still have time to try to affect the change. We're all just really getting into our positions of power. We're talking about us when we were teenagers. Well, all those kids at the first Lollapalooza, well, now they're the heads of corporations or nonprofits. Maybe we'll use a more righteous sort of
or
example.
or they're the speaker of the house, because there's an example of one of us being in power, and that's not exactly our model.
Yeah, sure. But that's my point is even though our teenage years and our formative years are decades ago, we're just getting to the place of where the boomers are moving on and we're starting to actually occupy the positions of power for kind of the first time. And so I wouldn't count us out yet because I'm still pissed about the things I was pissed about in the
Oh,
90s.
I'm
And
pissed
and
off
so is
daily.
Gen Z, by the way. Like that's my point is I feel like I feel connected to them in a way. Like
Mhm.
they're mad, we're mad. Like let's do a multi-generational sort of attack on the things that are
Yeah.
really bothering us as a society. And maybe we can move things forward.
Well, I think your connection there is actually interesting, because and I've had this with a lot of people I've met, that it seems to be a common thing with Gen X that we were very connected to our grandparents, and our
Yeah.
grandparents were in the Depression, fought in
Yeah.
World War II or Korea, and then we saw, and this is all generalization, of course, but we saw our parents' generation, have that whole hippie movement, and then they became yuppies, and it's like, well, what the hell? You sold out everything that
Yeah.
you fought for, and you made. I mean, if we look at people like the Clintons and stuff like that, they just, you just made everything kind of worse, and why we don't trust you. I mean, I trust my parents, but I
Yeah.
don't trust my parents' generation in the least, to
Yeah.
be honest. Great music, and great
Great
filmmaking and
music.
all that,
Really good music.
but I still think from our generation, we just had the best roundness of music. We were the first truly accepting of culture and otherness. I mean,
Yeah. I
as
think
a, as
it's
a as a generation.
yeah. And again, I don't want to generalize either, but I do feel that era, there was a lot of cross-pollination going on. Just look at Lollapalooza again. Would Ice-T have come to Mansfield, Massachusetts in 1991 without Lollapalooza? The
Right.
answer is definitely not. None of those bands were big enough to do an amphitheater by themselves anyway, even Jane's Addiction.
Right.
And so that's part of what was the defining element of that. And all of us sort of discovering hip hop in those early days and like loving it, like really
Right.
getting connected to it. And we used to listen. I was obsessed with Ice-T before Lollapalooza. Like we loved
Yeah.
Ice-T. driving
yeah.
through suburban Massachusetts, playing the Power album and the
Right.
Color soundtrack,
Yep.
and we just fucking loved him. We thought it was so great, and so I do think, I don't want to speak to other generations, but I do think our generation in particular was pretty good about opening our minds a little bit and letting other people sort of in. And we didn't have to be right all the time. We wanted that kind of thing. And I think Perry understood that very much, and Perry feels it deeply. And that's part of what he was doing with Lollapalooza. That's why he wanted Ice-T on that bill, is because it's a crazy bill when you look at it, and maybe the
Yeah.
craziest thing about the bill is Ice-T's on it. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like almost now it almost seems commonplace because Lollapalooza festivals became a thing in America for the first
Right.
time in many years. And now it's sort of commonplace. People go to Coachella or whatever the cool festival is now, and they expect to see hip hop and country and pop and whatever it is. That wasn't a thing prior to Lollapalooza, and Lollapalooza played a pretty good role in opening up a lot of minds across America and really showing people there's a lot of different voices in the world right now. And let's put them all together and see what happens. Perry loves putting things that maybe don't feel like they're a perfect fit and they might be a little messy. He loves that. Put them together and let's have a conversation about it. Not because he wants to see people fight, but because he really wants people to understand and he wants to open people's minds. He's a true artist. He wants people's minds opened. And he
Yeah.
understands that people communicating with each other will do that, and that the world will be in his opinion, and I agree with him, that the world will be a better place if people understand each other a little more. And so that's part of what was going on in our generation. You know, we were really into all that different stuff. I couldn't wait to find new things when I was a kid. I was like,
Oh,
what else is there? Because my
yeah.
parents' music collection is limited. Like, what else is there? And it's like, oh, here comes NWA. I was like, you can even say that? And like, I'll never forget NWA coming across
Yeah.
my space when I was a kid. Not my space, but my
Yeah.
my
Your
existence.
personal space.
um, and yeah, that was super cool for us. We loved it. We loved the crossbow. And I look back at it, and it felt like it was really pronounced, and it really meant a lot to us back then. And it feels like on some level that's broken down. Certainly, society at this point is pretty much in its separate corners, and people don't really want to hear what the other side has to say. And I hope we can get beyond that. But yeah, sorry, I rambled on.
No, 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 no. Hey, that's what this show's about. Rambling on.
Rambling
And
on with Brett Hickman.
yeah, the other thing, I think about deeply with our generation is that we were the first generation to really be integrated. It wasn't
Sure.
just like my parents' generation, maybe there was one, black kid in their
Yeah.
school or something.
Yeah.
I had several black friends throughout school that we went from first grade to high school with.
Yeah.
So you were, and there were shows like Electric Company and Sesame Street showing that there was, that there wasn't any difference. We were all people, and I'm not saying there aren't probably a ton of racists in our generation. I'm just saying
Of
that
course. Of
it
course.
it it was the beginning of something because of the fact that we were cohabitating together in some way. So that
Yeah.
led to Lollapalooza. That led to everything. I mean, if it
Yeah.
wasn't for that, maybe if schools had stayed in it, segregated, we'd probably still be having problems.
Yeah. Well, look, the civil rights movement was just before we were born,
Right.
which blows my mind because anything that happens before you're born, you're like, oh, it's ancient
It's
history. That's
old. Oh yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
1800s. It's like when you really look at the numbers, you're like, oh, that was like a decade before I was born.
yeah.
Like those black and white images that
Well,
you
it's
can't
because you
even believe
don't
your eyes.
experience it.
Yeah. So we all stand on the people who came before us, and like the generation before us obviously has its problems, but the civil rights era is what
Oh,
led to us was what led to Ice-T being in Mansfield, Massachusetts on the
right.
Lollapalooza tour in 1991.
Yeah.
I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek and oversimplifying it, but it's
No,
kind
but
of true.
yeah, what can you do? I mean, we can't sit there and have a have a lecture about the history of everything right now. So we're being a little general, but the thing in the first episode, and I apologize for sticking so close to the first episode, but the Sly Stone song,
Yeah.
I never
I
knew
couldn't.
that happened. I didn't know anything about that.
Oh, I remember it clearly when
Well,
I was a
obviously
kid.
you were there.
Yeah, I couldn't believe. I didn't know who Sly was probably by I of
Yeah,
course I know who
yeah,
Sly is now. I love Sly.
yeah.
But I didn't know who he was. And I didn't know you could say the N-word on stage. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was something you could even say. And not get arrested. I thought it was illegal. And I was totally just in shock and awe. Just couldn't even believe they were doing it. Um, and I'm proud of how our show contextualizes that because especially now, you could watch that segment of the show and be mortally offended, as Ice-T says. But I think Ice-T and Perry really help explain what their intentions were there, and intentions matter a lot, especially with a piece like doing "Don't Call Me N-Word Whitey." Um, it's a really, really powerful piece. Sly and the Family Stone was an interracial band. They wrote
Yep.
it for that reason as well. And Perry and Ice-T sort of took up that mantle and decided, racism is stupid. We're going to show you how stupid it is. Um, and and it was an important part of the story that I wanted to make sure made the cut because I think it's something that we need to understand now, still on a level, is that if we can sort of get past the name calling of it all and actually understand what each other is about, I believe that we're going to find a more fruitful path forward for everyone. And so, yeah, but when I was 17 years old, I was totally shocked. And getting back, and when this project was coming around, I was like, we have to tackle that because it was really a big moment for me anyway. And I thought it would be big for the Gen Xers in the world, but I also thought Gen Z could stand to hear it as well. And I think Ice-T does such a good job of sort of explaining what the hell they were thinking because you could totally watch that and be completely set off by it. But I think we were very wise in making sure I understood like this is what they're going for here and
Right.
here's why it was important.
Well, and part of that too. I mean, you see an artist like Ice-T. Ice-T isn't really somebody that's going to compromise
No, Ice-T
himself in
doesn't
any way.
care.
But he so even though I
He's
feel
not
like
bowing to anyone. He cares. He's not
right,
bowing to anyone, is what I'm trying to
right.
say. He cares.
Well, like I understand like the need for modern day. You have to sort of give more background in it, but I think the idea of just Ice-T and Perry Farrell doing that alone, if you know these two artists, you know that why you know instantly why they're doing it. But the problem is nowadays, especially with social media, where somebody says something and uh, like entertainment sites will twist it and just put part of something in there is just so they get clicks and comments and shares and all that nonsense, which is part of why I hate social media. Um, but the artist integrity there said everything. But yes, it was good that there was some explanation. Um, and since I don't have much longer, what were some of your surprises when you were working on this?
Um, I'm not sure it was a surprise, but getting into the activist booths and understanding sort of how we were articulating our frustrations in that exact moment. I knew it happened, but going back into that footage and understanding like, oh, we were really vocal about these things
Yeah,
as kids. Um, I, I'm not sort of surprised, but I was sort of like pleasantly refreshed. And I was like, oh, that's right. We were taking those seriously. One of the big surprises for me was this incredible film footage we have of that first 91 show. And we had this incredible Jane's film footage. And, you know, it was just like a total delight we didn't know that was out there until we started the project. We're like, oh my gosh, there's like multi-cam film footage of the first Lollapalooza.
yeah,
And also Perry's girlfriend at the time was recording on a little video camera and she had a bunch of great behind the scenes stuff. And so, um, the film nerd in me gets excited when I find cool archival, and there was a really sort of an embarrassment of riches on this show with cool
Yeah.
archival. Um, and yeah, I think those were the things that surprised me the most. I was also surprised when I went to Lollapalooza. I hadn't been in many, many, many years. I went in 2021 when they were reopening after COVID. It was the biggest gathering on North American soil since lockdown. And it was this big, dangerous sort of, it felt like it could have been a super spreader event. It turned out it wasn't at all. It was actually safer to be in the festival grounds in Chicago that weekend than it was to be outside somewhere else, strangely, because you had to have proof of vaccination, blah, blah, blah. No one cares. The point is I went to my first Lollapalooza in a really long time, and I thought it was going to be a bunch of like dudes who look like me, and like, no, it's a bunch of 18-year-olds.
Yep.
And I was like, oh yeah, like Lollapalooza is moving on as well. And this isn't just retro. Like this is alive and doing it right now, identifying the next new band that's cool, putting them on, giving them a shot to make a bigger name for themselves. And of course, the legacy bands are there, Foo Fighters and whoever are there as well. But it was kind of a cool revelation to realize that Lollapalooza has left the 90s and has grown beyond it. And I think one of the things that's also sort of surprising or just sort of special is like Perry wants to give that experience he gave me as a 17-year-old to the world now. He knows that American audiences are spoiled because we are. We have all these festivals and we can kind of see whatever we want whenever we want. But like he went to Mumbai last year, I believe was the first year that they did that. Festivals like Lollapalooza don't happen in places like Mumbai. Well, they do now, right? And so he now realizes if he wants to, the place he can make the most impact is actually outside of America and in other like Central America, and going around the world and giving these kids the thing that they gave me when I was 17, because he can't give it to American kids now. So now he's going around the world and giving it to them. And I think was a little bit surprising and certainly like endearing to me. I was like, thank goodness he's doing that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is a good place to stop.
Sure.
Michael, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really loved the docuseries. Do you have anything else coming up in the future?
Oh, of course I do.
Okay.
I have nothing I can talk about yet, but
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well, maybe on the
Things will be
next thing
coming around soon.
maybe the next thing you do, we could talk about that too.
Okay, cool.
All right. You have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right. Bye.